Well, sorry about the false start. It was a matter of one toggle not being in the right spot, and yours truly takes full responsibility for that. Anyway, tonight it is Power Plays, where we will break down the boldest moves in politics and hockey, from high-stakes meetings in Washington to provincial pushes for sovereignty, and of course, the race for Lord Stanley. We're bringing the heat. From Montreal, this is Night Talk, episode 32. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And as usual, 4 floors up from Gary in Montreal, I'm Eddie Tekalik.
And before we dive into our first segment, Carney and Trump at the Crossroads, we welcome your comments, be a part of the conversation, and post your thoughts. And we have a question for you tonight. Do you think Prime Minister Carney's meeting with Trump helped or hurt his credibility with Canadians? Post your responses and we will share your thoughts throughout the program. Speaking of Carney, he did meet with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House yesterday to kickstart conversations that will redefine our working relationship with our American neighbors. Now, of course, Trump held his signature Oval Office show and was very complimentary to Carney the first time around.
It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney with us. As you know, just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't get a vote back. His party was losing by a lot, and he ended up winning. So I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics. Maybe even greater than mine. But I want to just congratulate you. That was a great election, actually. We were watching it with interest, and I think Canada chose a very talented person, a very good person. But I just want to congratulate you, and ran a really great race. I watched the debate. I thought you were excellent, and I think we have a lot of things in common. We have some tough points to go over, and that'll be fine.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'm on the edge of my seat, actually. But thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president, focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker, securing your borders, ending the scourge of fentanyl and other opioids, and securing the world. And I've been elected with my colleagues here. With the help of my colleagues here, I'm going to spread the credit to transform Canada with a similar focus on the economy, securing our borders, again on fentanyl, much greater focus on defense and security, securing the Arctic and developing the Arctic. And the history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together. And I look forward to addressing some of those issues that we have, but also finding those areas of mutual cooperation so we can move forward.
Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, I'd like to get your response to this too. But Mr. President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state.
Yeah. No. Well, I still believe that, but takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut, and it's also a beautiful. As a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person. But when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway, because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace. You visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But
never say never. Never say never.
So have you asked the president to stop calling Canada the 51st state?
Yes. Today.
Okay, specifically, what did you ask him?
Exactly what you just said.
But what words do you use? How did you ask him?
Look, I gave you an answer. Do you have a follow-up?
I'll say. What was his answer?
Well, we'll look. I don't know. He's the president. He's his own person. I would go back to showing the difference between a wish and a reality. We're very clear. I've been very clear publicly, consistently. I've been very clear in private. It was clear again in the Oval Office. Would be clear throughout. The president, he understands that we're having a negotiation between sovereign nations and that we will only pursue and accept a deal that's in the best interests of Canada, not just in the short term, but in the medium and long term for Canada.
However, Albertans are more of a actions speak louder than words kind of people. So while I will in good faith.
There we go. Sorry about that. Just like I'm all over the place tonight. Okay, so there you have it. And before we actually get into the meat and bones of it, Eddie, I just want to once again remind our viewers, if we have any left after I pushed all of the wrong buttons. The question we have for you right now is, do you think Prime Minister Carney's meeting with the U.S. President Trump helps or hurts his credibility with Canadians? We want to hear your thoughts. So post your comment and let us know, and we will be sharing them. Now, we do have a couple of comments rolling in, so let's go back and pick up on those. And then you and I will have at it. Okay, wow. There we go. So from Monel, I've been watching many, many, many podcasts since yesterday, since this meeting happened, and I can tell you how the Americans see us. They are so happy and so proud of our Prime Minister. We'll go to the next part of that. At how he did stand up to Trump, not once, but twice. He said, "We will never, ever, ever be for sale." Americans' heads are like exploding in a good way because Carney stood up to him. And one more from her. Monel writes, "The fact our Prime Minister didn't break out laughing or rolling his eyes the whole time he was in the Oval Office, you got to give him brownie points for that." Just watching some of the way, his lips would move. And one of the reporters asked him, wondering what was going through your mind. And he said, what do you think?
The inside of his mouth must have been bloody. I would have been biting my cheeks like there is no tomorrow. I mean, I was biting my cheeks just watching it. I can just imagine him sitting there.
Yeah, no kidding. So what were your initial impressions of the whole show?
Well, you know what? I'll comment on two fronts. One, when I initially watched it. Two, when I rewatched it. As a very proud Canadian, I actually watched that show in the Oval Office with great anticipation and wondering what was going to happen. I thought Mr. Carney handled himself, Prime Minister Carney, handled himself extremely well. Sorry for calling him Mr. Carney. I just got into the bad habit after listening to Donald Trump disrespect Prime Minister Carney by calling him Mark repeatedly. So, I mean, right off the bat, I guess Mr. Trump was trying to set a stage there and really didn't show the respect that I thought he should give the head of state right on the onset by calling him Mark. He should have called him Mr. Prime Minister, which he refused to do the whole time. So, I mean, that didn't set the stage with me and didn't start off well for me, in fact, in terms of what Trump was saying. But, he was, I don't think he was placating Prime Minister Carney. He was trying to be as genuine as possible to kind of, just open the story in terms of what the conversation was going to be in the Oval Office. So that's one thing. I really was hoping he wouldn't take the invitation. My fear was he was going to get Zelensky'd, and we all know what happened there. And okay, didn't really happen, which is a good thing. And then Trump spent about 90% of the time in the Oval Office talking about himself. Was I surprised by that? Not at all. But that's just the way Trump is. And, seeing Prime Minister Carney sitting there, biting his tongue, rolling his eyes a little, chomping at the bit to get an opportunity to speak, which I don't think he had too much chance, very many opportunities to speak, especially at the end when he wanted to speak and that Trump called the session off altogether. I thought he did very well. I don't like the way Trump missed the opportunity in actually establishing a relationship in front of the cameras. He obviously was trying to beat the Trump that he is just dictate and placate people in terms of what his issues and concerns are, as opposed to focusing on his guest that was sitting in front of him, one very important guest being Prime Minister Carney. So I was angry, frustrated that Carney didn't get up and just walk out of the place for the disrespect that he was showed, yada, 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 so on and so forth. But of course, I was emotional. I took the opportunity to watch it again, a good chunk of it, and I looked at it through objective eyes. And you know what? I think Prime Minister Carney, for his first tilt at the international stage with a heavy hitter, I think he handled himself extremely well. I'm extremely proud of what he had accomplished. I saw the same thing Manel did from mainstream media and also from a lot of podcasts, how American mainstream, you're talking about your big ones, your ABCs, MSNBCs, and whatnot, complimented Prime Minister Carney on the way he handled himself. And as a matter of fact, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of talk about his level of patience, remaining stern, remaining flat-faced, and just replying to President Trump in the only way he understands, which is firm. He didn't insult him directly, but if you read between the lines of what he actually said on those two occasions that he did speak, he clearly put President Trump in his place by essentially saying, "We're not for sale," and then saying, "We're not for sale" 5 times, almost under his breath, looking around the entire room. And then by the same token, when he spoke about what we're trying to do in terms of getting over this issue of not having a relationship and the issue with tariffs, I thought he put Mr. Trump in his place, and he really didn't have anything to throw back at Prime Minister Carney, because he was really taken aback, and I think he was taken to the cleaners and a lot of that. Obviously, Prime Minister Carney's group had prepared the best they possibly can for the possible shit show that would have potentially happened in that room in the Oval Office. I think he and his team did a great job in terms of preparing themselves and dealing with the unknown and the unpredictable, which is the middle name of Mr. Trump. So at the end of the day, I think he did great. He certainly learned from that exercise in terms of his subsequent discussions with Trump. And you know what? I think his first opportunity to cut his teeth on a real huge stage, real huge global stage, I thought he did pretty good at the end of the day.
Well, certainly a lot of the pundits I was watching yesterday and into last night agree with what you're saying, and I don't disagree either. I think he held his own. I still am of the opinion that I would not have set him up, or if I'm Carney, set myself up to go into the Oval Office comedy show, because that can go south so quickly, because you have all of the Muppets lined up on the sofa just on the other side of Trump, and they're all chuckling and laughing from time to time, especially the Commerce Secretary. I picked his voice out, his laughter out at one point when really nothing funny was said.
Yeah, not like.
So, yes, you know, you have a sofa load of chuckleheads facing you, and then you have Trump, who meanders off into this discussion about hundreds and hundreds of pictures of former presidents that he found in a vault somewhere in the White House. They should be hanging, blah, blah. And then he goes off into about, oh, let's see, all of this gold, it's all 24 karat gold. Who the hell cares? Except you.
I thought he was going to say my picture is missing up there. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Who really cares, Donald? What you're doing with the White House? You know, it's not for sale, so who cares? And the other side of it is you are dealing with the biggest trading partner you have, and you know, at your doorstep, and you have them in your office. Like, to me, I still am of the opinion, if I had been an advisor to Carney, or Carney myself, like, I would have just said no. If I come to Washington, I'll come. We're doing closed door meetings. That's it. Maybe issue a communique after the meeting, but that's it. I'm not going to the Oval Office. I'm not engaging in any kind of show like that. And if you're not happy with that, well, you know what? It's been a couple of months with the tariffs. You're starting to feel it, and you're going to feel even more pain. So, you know, you can drop by Ottawa when you have a minute, and we'll do a meeting like it's supposed to be. And then we'll move on. We'll get something started. Like,
or like you and I said at one point, you know what? Set something up at a neutral site. Doesn't have to be in the United States. Let's go somewhere neutral where his circus is not there.
Yeah. Like, right? You know, I think we had a few more cards to our advantage than what he had, you know, in setting up this meeting. However, having said that, and you know, like I say, I'm still a little bit more than annoyed that it actually went down that way, and we had the Oval Office spectacle. Carney himself did well. I read an article just about an hour before the stream started, and it's Frank McKenna reacting, former New Brunswick Premier Frank McKenna, who served as U.S. ambassador for a while. And I have a lot of respect for Frank and his thoughts, his comments. He gave Carney full marks. He said, you know, for his first outing and to take on that kind of a meeting, he said he did well. He said there were a couple of times that, you know, I really thought he just should barge in. He said, I was hollering at the TV, but right. He said, overall, he said he came out of it. He did the country well. He served us well and made us all proud. So again, you know, and it's easy because if you recall, after Carney made it quite clear that Canada is not for sale, not now, not ever. And then he bristled when Trump was talking about, oh, you know, we give you the military protection for free.
Yeah.
And, oh, you know, we'll be there for you. He really bristled at that. And maybe he should have just jumped in right away. But like you and I were discussing before we started, he comes from a business background where, for the most part, it's a little more refined, dignified, and not in the political arena. And, what's happening with the Republican Party and the way that it's being run from the top down, starting with the President of the United States, you can't even call that even remotely
Refined.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, full marks overall, I think. And I think our credibility went up a notch with, actually, as Monel said, a lot of Americans, certainly, on the left side, the Democrat side, it bolstered them, I'm sure, to see Carney hold his own with Trump.
Right.
And, and they're going to meet at the G7 next month in Alberta.
Yeah. I got my opinion on that, but
Yeah, me too. Me too. And why don't we just tease everyone with it a bit? Because you know what? As you call it, Eddie, Con Air is on, coming
on
to,
its way.
yeah. And man, oh man, like, yes, there are certain diplomatic niceties that, you must, I guess, roll with. But in this case, in the way that this guy treats not only Canadians and has been treating Canada, but others as well, some of our allies,
Right.
like, he's a convicted felon. He doesn't get the fact that what he has done is wrong. People say no, and he just kind of he's like a 3-year-old. You say no, and they just toddle along anyway. Boom, 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 boom. So right. I just say, you know what? Sorry, you're not welcome in Canada. You're a convicted felon. You want to send JD up? Well, that's fine. That's okay. Because he contributes nothing to the meetings anyway, creates a little bit of chaos, and usually leaves early. So what is the point? You might as well be flying to Florida and to go play golf.
And join in while he's in his golf cart. Seriously. Well,
yeah, exactly.
At the same time, I mean, like you were saying, you have to take the G7 summit. Of course, is a global affair thing. I mean, a lot of big countries there, and you have to extend the courtesy and the politeness to a world leader. You know what? Great. I agree with you. He shouldn't be allowed into the country because he is a convicted felon. But I believe in Canadian law there are stipulations that allows exceptions. Okay, great. If Prime Minister Carney, is making an exception, allowing the Prime Minister into our country, I think he should outright lead to that, or say so, or indiscriminately broach the subject in saying, although he is a convicted criminal, we are making exemptions to allow him into the country, or something to that effect, as opposed to just letting him scot-free and coming into our country. I, for one, I'm 1,000% behind you, Gary, and I'm sure there are many Canadians out there that are saying, don't allow him into our country. He's a crook. But if from a point of diplomacy, diplomatic fairness, and how the world is viewing us, I can see where it would be politically incorrect to do something like that in terms of not allowing him in. However, I think you should take the opportunity, or his writer should take the opportunity, where you can actually sneak that in, where we are making an exception to allow him into our country, and we're looking forward to having him. Something like that. I just hate the fact that he's going to get away with coming into our country scot-free without any consequences. So the only consequence that we can levy on him is what is said to the media and what the media passes around. This guy's coming in on Con Air 1, and he's a convicted criminal coming into our country that has laws against people coming into our country like that.
Yeah. I've been politically incorrect in the past at times, and, really, I don't give a damn when it comes to this. I don't think the guy should be allowed in, period. And I think we should just say, no, throw the hammer down. And I don't think it will give us a black eye in the world community in any way, shape, or form. I think people will be applauding us to have the gumption to stand up and say, no, you're not coming in. you're a convicted felon. Yeah, we have to deal with you, but we can deal with you. I come to you, or we can go to a neutral ground where they'll allow you in. But just because you're president doesn't make a bit of difference. Our laws say, and if we make that exception for one, we're going to have to do it for, you're setting a precedent.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And who knows, like maybe some hotshot lawyer will say he has a client who's been denied entry to Canada, and he'll launch some kind of a challenge, charter challenge or whatever, because that person's rights are
grounds as well.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I really don't care if he's insulted, and if he, starts throwing tariffs around again, that's fine, because our focus is, first of all, interprovincial trade barriers, and secondly, opening up more trading routes with Europe and Southeast Asia. To hell with them. Period.
Yeah.
And I noticed he made points about, you're buying some of our military equipment, and, we're very happy about that. The South Koreans are putting a real push on to sell us military equipment.
Yes, especially their slightly watered down version of the F-35.
Yeah.
Very similar design. Yeah.
And I bet
God is making a big push as well. Really big push.
I bet we could strike a really good deal. And like we've discussed before, take the 16 F-35s that we have to take, that we're legally obligated to take right now, and either sell them or ship them off to the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because we've been sending equipment to them anyway, so why not send them 16 freshly minted F-35 fighter jets?
Yeah, as part of our
commitment,
our efforts to support an ally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and cut them out altogether.
Yes, exactly. Quick question, Trey. I didn't really check on international media. I would I'm just assuming here. I would imagine there was genuine interest in the rest of the world in terms of that meeting yesterday in the Oval Office. I mean, because a lot of eyes have been on Canada in terms of what they're going to be doing to take the lead in terms of addressing these tariffs, because we're stuck with this terrible child neighbor of ours down south, right? Mm-hmm. Are you aware of, or have you seen anything from international media outlets about what they saw in this session yesterday? Any impressions of how Mr. Carney handled himself internationally? I haven't seen anything myself, which is why I'm asking.
I just very briefly, Eddie, BBC and Sky News covered the session. I think what I've come across anyway, just as I say briefly, just a chance to glance and dash kind of thing. Overall, it's coming across in a very positive manner, as it is here in North America. It would be interesting to see what the Mexicans are saying too. Yeah. But it has been relatively positive, and of course, that meeting was fighting for top billing with all of the activity around selecting a new pope as well. So,
right.
You had two big stories bouncing, competing for top billing and headlines. So, but overall, it seems anyway, from what I've gleaned, that again, it's being met with very positive comments.
Nice.
We have another comment coming in here. Let's see. Should bring it up. Yep. From Joe out in BC. He proved his resolve and hopefully gained respect from some of his detractors within the Conservative Party. Joe, what do you think the chances are that they would even give him full, even half marks for pulling off what he pulled off yesterday? I think that party right now is too much consumed with a few other issues and probably a really very, very hefty case of sour grapes.
Yeah.
But, Polyev did make a comment about the meeting, and I just caught a glimpse of it, and I meant to go back and try and find it, but
Well, he did wish him the best of luck. I did see that.
yeah,
Uh, Conservative leader Ontario Ford also conveyed faith and wished him luck. So that I think that's a positive in itself that Pierre Poilievre put his ego aside and actually saw fit to wish him the best of luck. Because look, at the end of the day, Canada's livelihood's at stake here. So I think that was the right move on Poilievre's part. Unexpected, but he did.
yep. And let's see, Joe has another longer comment. Here we go. The fact is, Trump is not backing down from his tariffs and constant threats to our sovereignty. No,
Yeah.
he made that very clear yesterday that when the reporter asked him, are you, is there any movement on the tariffs? No. Why? Because that's the way it is. Okay, well.
Well, yeah, that was crazy what he had said. I mean, everybody's after him about the deal and 90 deals in 90 days. And of course, he's actually produced Zippo. His own secretaries are saying we made no communication with China, while he's saying they're speaking to China. Or sorry, as he says, China. And at the end of the day, I mean, he was saying that we're the ones who are going to make the deal. We're going to tell them what they're going to be doing and this, that, and the other thing. Almost insinuating the way tariffs work is that other countries pay for them, and that's something that his team, state-controlled media in Fox, completely neglect on purpose, not to communicate the fact that American companies, American businesses, and at the end of the day, the American population pay for tariffs. It is like a tax, and they refuse to do so. And I think yesterday in one of the Senate review, who was that? Yeah, Scott Bessent. They caught him almost with his pants down because by law he cannot lie to Congress. So when somebody asked him, do people pay for tariffs? Yes or no? He kept on fumbling with words, couldn't find his words, yada, yada. And at the end of the day, whoever was asking those questions, the senator basically said, okay, so yeah, I guess your answer is no because you can't answer it. So that's, and Trump almost let the cat out of the bag just by how stupidly he was answering the questions or positioning his tariff position to the rest of the world that he's going to dictate what other countries pay. They don't pay a damn thing. What planet are you on? And I actually saw Carney's reaction to that entire statement or line of statements that were coming out of Trump's mouth, almost in complete disbelief. I mean, literally, you looked at his face and he was bewildered. I mean, it wasn't amusement. I think he was absolutely bewildered. And at some point, I actually told my wife, I go, look, I think he's trying to hold back a laugh. He's trying to hold back a smile. It was crazy how controlled Prime Minister Carney was not to burst out laughing, A, or B, embarrass the President of the United States with his own wording. And I think C, he was about to do that at the very end before Trump cut him off and basically closed the Oval Office shit show.
Yep, and just like turned his body away from him for the final 5 or 6 minutes and ignored him.
Yeah.
Well, he carried on his conversation with the media reps and the couch of characters.
Did you notice that, Gary? I mean, just one last thing. I mean, the media, okay, typically you'd have international media. You would expect a strong contingency of Canadian media there. I don't know if the Canadian media or the mainstream media was purposely being blocked out of questioning, or questions that were directed towards Prime Minister Carney were kind of muted out by microphones. All you kept on hearing is questions about something Trump was up to. One,
but if you notice
yelling over the other, and then I almost noticed President Trump just kind of T-Rump, looking around. Oh, who am I going to ask this question of now? Oh, yeah, you. I want to ask you the question, almost as if it was staged in terms of which reporter was going to be allowed to ask the question. I mean, that's what I saw a
He
few
was
times.
looking. He was looking for his favorites, his
Oh, yeah.
friendlies,
Oh my God.
and picking them out. You could see that
Yeah.
like you say, he was scanning the group, and they were all crowded in, and he was searching. You could see the head going and the eyes widen and everything, and searching out.
You figure a CTV or a CBC reporter would have been picked out. I mean, if I, you know what, here, hindsight 2020, if I was Prime Minister Carney, I would say, hey, CTV, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah,
That's just me. Oh,
but he wouldn't get a word in edgewise. Number one, number two, it's not his house, right? So it's hard for him to call the shots.
yeah.
Anyway, Joe was saying, and this is in relation to a comment I made about the Conservatives, and he says, I was hoping they may have some free thinkers, but yes, I'm not holding my breath. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of follow-up takes place over the next month or so, and then the G7 meeting in the early summer, because apparently they've agreed to meet again at that session. So it will be interesting. Now, Trump still says he likes Carney. He thinks he's a great guy. And he said that at another event following the meetings, and they were doing a scrum with them. Reporters were doing a scrum, and one of them asked about the meeting again, and he came back with the same thing. He says, I like the guy, and he said, I think we'll get some things done. So
until he says something he doesn't like.
Right.
Right.
Or does something that he doesn't like, or he gets up tomorrow morning and whatever has run through his head overnight, off he goes.
I saw an interview, I forget where somebody had asked him about calling the Prime Minister of Canada governor. And he goes, well, I used to call Trudeau governor, and you know what? I might call Mark governor. I don't know. We'll decide.
Yeah.
Really? This is what you're going to say after hosting a historical meeting like that with your biggest trading partner and being corrected on the spot that Canada is the biggest trading partner? And no, Mr. President, you cannot say that you don't need anything from us or your biggest trading partner. I mean, right there, that's embarrassment 101, you idiot. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I had to say it.
Well, sometimes he just draws the best and the worst out of us all. So
yes,
anyway.
Does.
Well, you know what? I'm not sorry to say that I think it's time we wrap up this particular segment and de-Trump ourselves for a while. So coming up, a sovereignty play by Alberta. But first, as part of Elbows Up, I am dumping my Microsoft 365 subscription. And as you may know, Microsoft 365 includes OneDrive cloud storage option. So I've been looking for a Canadian solution, and I have found it. It's called sync.com, sync.com. It's a cloud-based storage operation based here in Canada with reasonable pricing and under the protection of Canadian laws. And they have you have the ability to go in and sign up for a free account. It's a 5 gig limit on the free account. I did it to try it, and once I was satisfied with what was the way it was operating, and it's really very clean and very slick, I said, okay, you know what, I'm in. And as it turned out, they were running a 25% off on the annual subscription for the 2 terabytes that I bought. And I think they're still running some specials. So what I did is I put a link in the description below. And if you're interested, you can click there. And then you'll be presented with the option to sign up for the 5 gigs free, give it a try. I know I've come across, and I came across it on Facebook, just after people started to, buy in Canada sites. And this came up because, there were people like me looking for an alternative to OneDrive. And so I thought, okay, you know what, I'll give it a try. And so I did. And I've already moved all of my personal OneDrive material over. It didn't take a whole lot of time. It's not, it's only like 32 gigs, I think. Tomorrow I'm moving Deborah's over. And then for the next couple of days, I have some video files to bring over. That'll be a little more intensive, but everything has gone smoothly. And so,
Good for you.
Yeah. So there you go. So we've got sync, sync.com. And if you're on Bookface, then just scroll down through or go to the one of the Buy in Canada sites, and you'll find information on it. And what's Joe saying here? Let's go and see. He just popped up. Speaking of Microsoft, my Windows 10 is rapidly coming to an end. Regarding security updates, considering Linux. Or as some say Linux, but any thoughts? Linux. Actually, I have an old MacBook Pro that's 14 years old now. And my wife has been using it, and I loaded Windows on it for her because it's Intel based and you could do that. But she has Windows 10, and yeah, it grinds to a halt in late October. And so we've been deciding what to do. I think the best solution for her is to get a new iPad, and she, have the iPad. I've got my MacBook Air, and it's a M1, so it's not the newest M series, but it's going strong. It's driving all of this. So I've used Linux, and I have to say there are a lot of distros now that are much easier to follow and make the transition, whether you're coming from Mac or Windows. And there are one or two distros in particular that you have a hard time once you fire them up to tell that you're actually not in Windows. So Joe, I would not hesitate to give it a try. As a matter of fact, you can download them now. There are a number of distros that are with Mint One. There's another one that's called Elementary or something like that. But just do a quick search or ask ChatGPT to recommend the Linux distros that are similar to Windows 10, Windows 11, and you'll get them. Yeah, they're it's come a long way. It's much more user friendly now than it ever was, or at least the last time I tried it. That's what I found. Eddie.
Yeah, a lot of companies use Linux OS as their baseline for all of their systems. Last two companies I worked at, in fact, everything was Linux based, and then never had a problem with it. So it's a good option.
Yeah, and you're right. That's right. I keep forgetting that most servers on the back end are run Linux based. So anyway, yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Joe. And let us know how you work out overall. All right, let's move on.
Yeah, I was just going to say before we moved on, I think there was a comment made by Manel again. She mentioned something about guys, please.
No, I don't see it.
No. Well, I'll read it out loud. Manel actually posted as a comment. Hang on a second here. Guys, please, this can't happen. If that man is so unhinged, we're already going to lose jobs because of these stupid tariffs and what he's doing. Could you imagine what he would do? So he's so unhinged. Good way to close off that section with President Trump.
Yeah, food for thought.
So true.
Yeah, I wonder why that didn't come in here. Anyway. All right, so let's look at sovereignty or standoff. Danielle Smith's Alberta Gamble. And of course, we've talked a bit about this in the past, but this past Monday, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith addressed her province regarding its future within Canada after meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney last Friday, a meeting she described as positive in nature.
However, Albertans are more of a actions speak louder than words kind of people. So while I will in good faith work with Prime Minister Mark Carney on unwinding the mountain of destructive legislation and policies that have ravaged our provincial and national economies this past decade, until I see tangible proof of real change, Alberta will be taking steps to better protect ourselves from Ottawa. As a start, I will soon appoint a special negotiating team to represent our province in negotiations with the federal government on the following reforms requested by our province. We hope this will result in a binding agreement that Albertans can have confidence in. Call it an Alberta Accord, if you will. First, Alberta requires guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coasts for the international export of Alberta oil, gas, critical minerals, and other resources in amounts supported by the free market rather than by the dictates and whims of Ottawa. Every province in the country, other than Alberta and Saskatchewan, have coastal port access, and no province needs it more given the size and value of our resources. This will benefit all Canadians to the tune of trillions of dollars of economic activity, including billions for First Nations partners. Second, the federal government must end all federal interference in the development of provincial resources by repealing the No New Pipelines Law, C-69, the oil tanker ban, the net zero electricity regulations, the oil and gas emissions cap, the net zero vehicle mandate, and any federal law or regulation that purports to regulate industrial carbon emissions, plastics, or the commercial free speech of energy companies. These laws are destroying investment confidence and costing Canada and Alberta hundreds of billions in investments each year. They need to go. Third, the federal government must refrain from imposing export taxes or restrictions on the export of Alberta resources without the consent of the government of Alberta. Frankly, all provinces should be given that same respect for their resources. And fourth, the federal government must provide to Alberta the same per capita federal transfers and equalization as is received by the other three largest provinces, Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. We have no issue with Alberta continuing to subsidize smaller provinces with their needs, but there is no excuse for such large and powerful economies like Ontario, Quebec, BC, or Alberta to be subsidizing one another. That was never the intent of equalization, and it needs to end.
I do want to throw in a couple of things. The 10% figure for eligible voters, that's down from 20%. That's an amendment to the existing law that I believe has now been passed by the legislature. The other thing of it is, when you listen to those four demands that she's put in front of Prime Minister Carney, and in response to the 10 years that the Trudeau government and his environment minister really dumped all over the resource-based industries, particularly oil and gas in Alberta and in Saskatchewan. I don't have a real argument against what she's asking for. I think what she's asking for is fair. And I also like how she brought in changes are needed to the equalization formula, because it does. She's right. It makes no sense for Alberta, BC, Ontario, and Quebec, the largest economies in the country, to be shoveling money back and forth to each other under the equalization formula. She also made it very clear that she doesn't have an issue with Alberta contributing to equalization payments for smaller provinces. She gets what is
That's what it was
involved in that
intended. That's
respect.
what it was intended for.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
But somehow it has come around, and why would a province as rich as Alberta or Ontario, Quebec, Quebec is a resource-based economy as well, and British Columbia. Why would we be receiving equalization payments or anything associated with the equalization formula? It makes absolutely zero sense. So I don't argue with what she's saying. She's also seems to have tempered her views as to saying she wants a sovereign Alberta in a united Canada. And she's not the only premier who has pushed for more sovereignty at the provincial level. I mean, God knows she's taking a page right out of the playbook of Quebec.
Absolutely.
And I'm surprised that other provinces haven't done this long before this.
Well, I'm surprised that Alberta's only pushing this issue seriously now. I mean, a resource-rich province like Alberta not doing this in 1980, 1985, 1990. I'm just astounded. I mean, there was talk of it, especially when Preston Manning was in charge and wielding his ways out west. What took them so long? I'm kind of mixed in terms of anytime you hear the word sovereignty or in Quebec sovereignty association and so on and so forth. Considering what we went through here in Quebec, it's tough to hear, but I clearly understand where she is coming from in terms of what she asked Prime Minister Carney for in order to keep her interest and keep her constituent interests and keep the industry interests in Canada as opposed to just Alberta specific. So I'm in agreement for what she's asking for. I just have a hard time hearing that word sovereignty and listening to that word sovereignty objectively, being a Quebecer and seeing the devastation of what the proposition of sovereignty did to this province in terms of its economy, which I think is going to take a long time longer to recover. I mean, don't forget, 1976, Canada was the financial center of all of Canada. Not even close anymore. All because of the politics, and you know what that was all about. So, you know what? Yes, they certainly took it out of Quebec's playbook. It seems like it, but be very, very careful of what happens once you light that match and you try to put it out with your fingers, which can invariably happen to Alberta if the population decides to go down the referendum route. You're looking at international business potentially just drying up completely. How many companies may, pull stake and move out? You don't know. I mean, albeit in Quebec was somewhat different because of the language laws here. A lot of organizations left. We just don't know what this potentially might mean for the mighty province of Alberta if they choose to go down the sovereignty path. So, you know what? If she and Prime Minister Carney can strike an agreement that those main points, her objectives for the province of Alberta, are met, and you know what? She's absolutely right. I think Albertans, and as a matter of fact, most provinces in Canada, they don't like words. They like to see action. So if Carney can come up with an action plan and actually drive it as opposed to just lip service, I think this whole threat of sovereignty might become a moot point if he actually delivers, which is some of the things that the Conservative Party promised to give Alberta anyway. So if he can pull it through, brownie points for him, and I think that'll unify Canada, further unify Canada, and also bring Alberta on board much more so than they felt on board for years. 10 years is probably an understatement, probably more than that. So you know what? I have trust and faith that Mr. Carney can bring Premier Smith to the table and agree to A, B, C, and D, and it'll be done by this time. That's what she's looking for. She's looking for assurances B, she's actually looking for action. And C, Gary, get that darn pipeline established from coast to coast. We have one of the largest refineries in the East Coast in New Brunswick waiting to refine Canadian oil. We have to get it there. Quebec's got to get on board. Let's move forward.
Well, you get no argument from me on that aspect of it. The grievances that she brings up, those 4 points, you can trace it right back to Justin's father, Pierre Trudeau, back in the 70s when he dumped all over Alberta and the oil industry. And if you recall, nationalized it at the time.
Right.
Much to the dismay of Albertans. So, there has been this undercurrent that's just been bubbling just under the surface for a number of years. And the last 10 years of Justin Trudeau and his environment minister have not been kind to Alberta, to Saskatchewan, to British Columbia, to most provinces right across the country in various ways. So I get it. And I, as I say, don't disagree. The only area where I have any disagreement with is giving the provinces more autonomy on healthcare and education. I think there are some things when you're in a federation that eventually the federation has to take full responsibility for those particular items for the greater good. And when I say the greater good, to ensure that there is an acceptable level of service maintained from coast to coast to coast across this country. We're not seeing that in healthcare at the moment, and we're not seeing that in education either. So I think as much as I understand they feel they should have it, the provinces have not done a great job with healthcare and education in the greater scheme of things. And it's nearly impossible or really very, very unsettling for a family or an individual or a couple to move from one province to another in this country and not get the same level of education or not get the same level of health care that they had in the province they had just left.
Right.
The differences would amaze you. So I think as part of the responsibility of being part of the Federation and for the greater good of all Canadians, I think that things like healthcare and education in particular, and also resources and the movement of resources has to become a federal government responsibility. The movement and security of our resources, oil, potash, and even electricity.
Right.
We're selling electricity to the U.S. or across from province to province. I think that in order to maintain a certain level of service and quality of service, I think that, and because of the security involved, now you can't argue against the fact that national security is involved when you're dealing with oil and natural gas and potash and electricity and water. These are national security issues and therefore should come under the responsibility of the national government, the federal government in Ottawa. That's how I see it. And we have a question if anybody wants to chime in. Is Alberta's sovereignty push a legitimate demand or a political distraction? So let us know what you think about that. Eddie?
Well, I got a question for you. I got a question for you, Gary. I mean, aside from Premier Smith's demands, and I think a lot of Canadians would agree with it. Albertans certainly agree with it. I know Quebec is looking very closely at those questions. Aside from that, aside from the wording of the using the word separation and sovereignty, let's just put that aside. What do you think about the timing of all this? I'm not sure about the timing of all this, and is it good timing? Is it bad timing? Considering what we're going to be up against if Trump continues in his worldly ways, what do you think about the timing of all of this pressure?
I think if you're Danielle Smith and anybody in Alberta who even has a notion of some kind of separation or
Right.
whatever you want to call it, increased sovereignty, I think the timing is great. I think the timing for the discussion on those 4 areas that she outlined in the clip we played is ideal because we have an almost new government. We have some of the same people from the Trudeau era, but they were distancing themselves from Trudeau. So, you have to give them full marks for that. And we have a new prime minister who wants to share and start moving on his new economic vision for the country. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to move in that direction, and if Prime Minister Carney is serious about this, then I think he has to be open to the ideas, for example, that Smith did present. I think her timing, and here we are, we've almost been caught with our pants down with the tariffs being thrown at us because we are so heavily tied to the U.S. in that market. So, we really do need to diversify our trade. And part of that, and as she says, as she said, they don't have access to Tidewater, direct access to Tidewater for shipping oil and natural gas offshore.
Her only source of business is the United States right now, is it not?
Basically, they are shipping some natural gas, I think, through to BC, and I believe they are shipping some oil to the refinery in St. John. The refinery in St. John can handle the heavy oil.
Right.
And of course, we all remember a very tragic event here in Quebec a few years ago where a whole trainload of that oil went charging into a small town and basically obliterated it. And that was oil bound for St. John by train because we don't have a pipeline going through to the refinery in St. John.
Yeah.
So, if the political element in Quebec didn't learn from that disaster, that tragedy, and our national government didn't learn from that tragedy, really, what hope do we have in some respects? But we do have a new start. We have a new leader who has not come up through the political realm as such and has a slightly different approach, fresh approach to maybe we're going to actually see the country run in on a more business-like platform. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I hear you, Gary. And you know what, personally, I think she's a strong premier, a very strong premier, probably one of the strongest Alberta has had in a while. Very sharp, I think, to be respected and to be feared. She backs her constituents up, come hell or high water. She listens to her constituents. I would have preferred if she continued to have those discussions with Prime Minister Carney in terms of what her demands are for her province. No question about it. No better time than now. I think, and I won't call it rhetoric, or I'll use rhetoric for a lack of a better word, sovereignty, separation, that type of ideology, changing the bill in Alberta as opposed to 20%, just to have 10% of her public sign a petition to move towards a referendum question, which is a political move, of course, to get what they were looking for in reducing it to 10%. She could have waited 2 or 3 months. I don't think 2 or 3 months to allow Canada to get its plan through in terms of free cross-border trade across all provinces as a priority, A, and B, for Canada to remain united in its efforts against the Trump regime and dealing with these tariffs and renegotiating our trade agreements with other countries that want to do business with Canada and countries that we want to purchase from. I think she should have shown better judgment and waited 3 or 4 months at least before starting the sovereignty or the separatist question and driving towards that. It wouldn't have made a big difference one way or the other in terms of the viability of Alberta, because she's having those discussions on her 4 key points as to what she'd like to see for Alberta. So in my opinion, Gary, I think she could have waited. I don't know what she was doing in terms of posturing. Is this something that was agreed to with her recent visits down to Mar-a-Lago? I don't know, but I think she could have waited, and it wouldn't have hurt Alberta at all. It would not have hurt him at all.
Well, the other side of it is that it did come off a meeting she had last Friday. I mean, this was boiling before this, but
right.
The Prime Minister met with her last Friday, and both of them said it was a good meeting and a good start to things. And so she, the pulse has been, kind of boiling along as to some of the Western separation again, the Alberta separation talk.
Yeah.
So it's out there. So to me, it's kind of pulling everything together, and because you have this new start, jumping in and at least laying out, if nothing else, talking points, right? Now, the change to the legislation, bringing it from 20,000 to, or 20% to
10%.
Yeah. That could have waited, no question. That could have waited. But maybe it was designed to be, we're talking, yes, but also, a little nudge of the elbow to the ribs. Prime Minister, we are making, setting it up for the people who are pushing in this direction to address this at some point sooner rather than later. So,
yeah, but cutting it down to 10%, I mean, think about that. I mean, the lower you go, the more radical,
the easier it is.
The bottom 10% to get what you need, right? I mean, look at the United States of America. The bottom portion is always the more radical element of any sort of democracy. So, I mean, going to 20%, which will provide you more of a mix of people in terms of getting that 20%. Now you're basically refining that to only a 10% requirement. And you know what? Most of the radical thoughts and thought-thinking processes, the people that are saying, let's make Alberta a 51st state or let's join the United States, you're going to find those in that 10%. So it'll be much easier to get the referendum question on the table with just 10% requirement. So I call it gerrymandering, call it what you want, but I think this was a little underhanded, if you ask me.
On the other side of it, let's get it on the table, boom, and move on and see where it goes. At least she's playing to the malcontents and giving them something to chew on. But there's also like a series of town hall meetings planned for across the province. I believe it's this fall. Yeah. And roundtable discussions and so on. So there's a lot more involved than just even making that change as far as from 20% to 10%. So Elizabeth writes, what was Trudeau doing for the country? Elizabeth, there's a lot of us that are scratching our heads and asking the same question, and we don't have an answer other than driving it into the ground.
Yeah.
and setting us up the way that he did by hanging around far too long. Anyway, Elizabeth says, I have a friend that left BC and moved back home to Montreal, where she was raised, and is having the hardest time with her disability. It's been over 1 year. Shameful. The hardest time with her disability.
Yeah, I think she that left BC and she came back to Montreal. So she's having a hard time with our medical system here in Quebec.
Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Gotcha. And I can understand that. It's
Very
rather,
shameful.
yeah, it's daunting for sure.
Well, it
And
goes to the point, that goes to your point in saying that healthcare should be controlled right across the board, across all provinces by the Canadian government to ensure uniformity across all provinces and all territories, right?
yeah, totally.
I'm sorry to hear that, Elizabeth.
Joe says Alberta sovereignty may be a moot point if T. Rump was to act on his threats. Yeah. Yep. Good point there. And Monel says she could have given him a chance before flying off the handle like that. I'm dropping the separation word. I hate that word. I agree with Eddie. Very, very bad history there. Oh, yeah, no question there's bad history. No question there's bad history. But, something that we have to deal with. And part of it is, again, the federal government losing its way along. Yeah. And it's drifting and focusing on these wild green schemes and all of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with a whole bunch of controversies that have since surfaced. So yeah. Joe says, cutting off your nose to spite your face. Don't like our home and native land. You're free to leave. Take O'Leary and PP with you. Good one, Joe.
Joe, we're going to find some way to move some Moosehead beer from East Coast to you. Nice one.
Wow, right in, direct hit. Take no prisoners.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
All right. So, well, certainly we'll be keeping our eye on these roundtables and discussions, the town hall meetings that they're planning in Alberta. And again, sometimes the federal government needs that little bit of elbows up, boom, to get them moving on some things. Okay, so up next, guess what? Eddie's NHL Playoffs Pulse. If you are enjoying our live stream, remember to like, share, and definitely subscribe. It only takes a few seconds to click, and those clicks make a large contribution to helping our channel grow. We thank you for your support. Well. It is what you've been waiting for. It is time for our resident #1 Habs fan to bring us up to date on the postseason quest for Lord Stanley's Cup, minus his Habs, unfortunately. First, here's a question for you, our viewers. Which team looks most dangerous right now, and who do you want to see hoist the cup? Take it away, Eddie.
Well. The Toronto Maple Leafs have actually made it to the next round. Can I hear the applause, Gary? There we go. Happy man.
Oh, wait. I can do better than that.
Oh. Yeah, you know what? Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm not a Leaf fan, but I told you on the onset I was hoping the Leafs would make it out of the first round, and I'm really happy they did it. And what did I say was the formula for the Toronto Maple Leafs? The core four had to show up. Typically, when the big boys came out to play, the core four typically disappeared. Just to give you an idea, last year compared to this year, the core four showed up. This year, the core four being Nylander, Marner, Matthews, and John Tavares, they've actually scored 33 points amongst them in the first 7 games. So that allowed them to advance to the next round, and they're playing against Florida tonight. Last year, after being bounced out in the first round, they only had 12 points combined amongst them. So they finally came out to play with the big boys. Good for them, guys. You finally woke up. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in the second round. So that's really great to hear that the core four are finally producing after the last 5-6 years, Gary, and they continued their rebuilding strategies since 1967. So at least they're keeping you happy. So
I mean, I have one thing to say to that. Actually, not say, but I have one thing to go with that. Are you ready?
What's that? Yeah. Holy crap! You've been preparing for tonight's show, haven't you? Yeah. So you know what? Great for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They beat Ottawa in 6 games. Congratulations. And Ottawa Senators is another rebuilding team. They made it to the playoffs this year again. Congrats to them for a good season. And then there was my Montreal Canadiens, the Habs. They lost in 5 games against Washington, as expected. As I mentioned before, the Habs management said in year 3 of the rebuilding that they were hoping to be in the mix. Well, the kids, they surpassed expectation. Not only were they in the mix, they made it to the playoffs, and they actually played with dignity. They did not get blown out. They played hard. Great learning experience for the young players. And the beautiful thing about the Habs, they have a core 6. And the core 6 are all under 24 years of age, 23, 24 years of age. So they are going to be a force to be reckoned with, and hopefully play Toronto in one of the playoff rounds and take care of business that way. So I guess we're going to have to wait till next year for the Montreal Canadiens, and congratulations to them.
And Joe says, sorry about your Habs, that they gave it a valiant effort. I see good things for them given their young nucleus of players.
The core 6.
Thanks,
wonderful.
Joe.
Thank you, Joe. And Gary, as I texted to you right after it happened, the Winnipeg St. Louis game. This is why hockey is one of the greatest sports to watch during playoff time. 60 minutes of absolute mayhem with St. Louis in Game 7. St. Louis was leading Winnipeg 3-1 with 1 minute and 56 seconds left to go in the game. Winnipeg, with taking the goalie out, Winnipeg scores 3-2, and with 3 seconds left to go in the game, they tied it 3-3. It was an absolutely fast, spectacular game. And the game went into double overtime. What else can a hockey fan ask for? And the comeback was complete. Winnipeg scored in overtime to win that series. What a game. What a tribute to the fantastic sport of ice hockey. No other sport in the world compares to it in terms of just absolutely spectacular 60 minutes of fast-paced action. Congratulations, Winnipeg. I was really, really happy to see that. Also, in the first round, another Canadian team did something that doesn't happen very often. Edmonton played Los Angeles. They won in 6 games, so Edmonton advances to the next round. Again, Los Angeles had a better record in the regular season. It's one of the upsets. And Los Angeles was leading 2-0, and the Edmonton Oilers, with the leadership of Connor McDavid, came back roaring 4 games into the win column, and they beat them 4 games to they beat them 4 games to 2. So in 6 games. Other games, Vegas wins in 6 games over Minnesota. Carolina Hurricanes beat New Jersey 4-1. Dallas Stars beat Colorado in 7. And Florida beat Tampa, and Tampa had the better record. And Florida beat Tampa in 5 games. And Florida is playing the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight in their game 2, where the Maple Leafs won game 1 a couple of days ago. Now, in terms of predictions, Gary, because you always ask me, Eddie, what do you think, and who do you think is going to win the Stanley Cup? I've had this theory I go with all the time, and I've been right more often than not. And my dad always asks me, who is going to win the Stanley Cup? And I always tell him, Dad, the team that has the most Canadian-born players on their rosters. That's who's going to win. So, Gary, I took the liberty of doing some research today on the statistics on the NHL, on NHL.com. So, of the teams remaining, Oilers, Jets, Leafs, Hurricanes, Panthers, Stars, Knights, and Washington Capitals, which team do you think has the most Canadian players percentage-wise on their entire rosters?
Oh, gosh.
Joe, you're a hockey fan. Who do you think, if you're still there?
Yeah. Oh, golly. Wow, that's a good question. I don't know.
Roll it off your tongue, quick. First thing comes to mind. Team with the most Canadian players.
Winnipeg.
No, you're close. The Edmonton Oilers.
Okay.
65% of their roster, 21 players on their overall roster are Canadian-born players. So they have 69.6%. Last year, they were at about 53%. So they upped it in terms of big boys. And when the big boys come to play, you bring them on your team. And that's what the Edmonton Oilers did. So I'm going to have to pick them for the Stanley Cup this year. In second place are the Winnipeg Jets. They have 52.9% of their entire roster Canadian-born players. And the next team, the next team behind them at 53% are the Las Vegas Knights.
Really?
Yep. And then a big drop to 44%, the Carolina Hurricanes in terms of players that are born in Canada. Last year, the Florida Panthers were at about 52% in terms of Canadians on the roster, and then the rest was a mix of American and European players. So, you know what? I'm going to go with statistics. I'm going to put my money on the Edmonton Oilers and the Winnipeg Jets. Either of those are going to win the Stanley Cup. Now they may end up playing the Leafs. You never know because it's the Campbell Conference against the Prince of Wales Conference. The Leafs are at 46% of players being Canadian-born. And that 37% US-born players. So you know what? It's going to be a tough battle. I checked the weight and height of all these teams. They're giving away maybe 5 pounds one way or the other. So these are the big boys playing hockey right now. So you know what? I really wish this is going to be a great opportunity for Canada to actually bring a Stanley Cup home, because we got 3 solid teams in there in the Leafs, the Oilers, and the Jets. So I hope the boys bring it home.
Joe just chimed in. Edmonton's goaltending may be their Achilles heel.
He is not wrong. Yeah. So American Hellebuck, who's the goaltender for the Winnipeg Jets, he's been struggling a little bit, but his game in period 2, period 3, and overtime was just standing on his head. So hopefully they can turn it around and the Canadian team can bring the cup home. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, and he says, I just hope we can bring the cup home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I remind a lot of my contacts on social media, on Facebook, that are my American friends, are always reminding me USA, USA every time a cup ends up in United States City. But more often than not, the majority of the players are from dear old Canada. Go Canadians.
We still have it. And Joe also, by the way, earlier said he'll be waiting for the Moosehead.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
And with that, it is time to whistle down the conversation for this week, whether it's backroom deals, provincial provocations, or sudden death overtime. We're keeping score across the board. Thanks to everyone for joining the conversation tonight. And let's keep it going below if you are watching at a later date. Also, don't forget to like, share, and definitely subscribe. Night Talk returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night. Good night, Eddie.
Good night, Gary. Good night.